and welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. I'm Rebecca Felgate and I love history. It was probably my favourite topic in school. It's just so interesting to use the power of hindsight to see how and why we have got to where we are today. The great thing about history is also being able to see which were the good decisions and which were the bad. Join me as we talk about the top 10 worst mistakes in history. Coming in at number 10, we have the California Hunter Fire. Wildfires are scary things, and in the hot, dry conditions of summer and early autumn, they can happen, and in some places, special measures should be taken to avoid them. Sadly, in San Diego in 2003, a hunter had got lost, so decided to light a signal fire. This was a huge mistake that sparked the worst wildfire the state of California has ever seen. The fire raged for several days, and at its height, it was traveling at 15 kilometers an hour, so you absolutely could not outrun it. The flames destroyed nearly 300,000 acres and also thousands of buildings. Sadly, 14 civilians and one firefighter lost their life. The fire caused $1.5 billion worth of damage. Coming into number 9, we have rejecting trade with the Mongol Empire. The Khwarezmind Empire, now Iraq and Iran, was destroyed in the 13th century. This all happened when empire leader Al-ad-Din Muhammad refused a deal with Genghis Khan, the ruthless leader of the Mongol Empire. Khan had sought trade deals with the neighbouring empire, an offer which was refused. Souring things further, one of the Mongol diplomats sent in to negotiate was murdered by the Khwarezmind. Ultimately, this led to Khan deploying over 200,000 men and totally destroying their neighbour's empire. Gone off the map for good. Coming into number 8, we have the crash of Wall Street. The stock market crash of 1929 came as a result of a series of cataclysmic mistakes in American banking. Ultimately, more money was out on loan in the United States than the country actually owned. The rise in consumerism in America led to overproduction, overconfidence led to irresponsible loans, and a lot of people were buying shares on borrowed money, especially small banks that just couldn't sustain this. In the end, the American economy was a house of cards that could only collapse, and it did. Not only did it collapse, it also took down most industrialized Western nations with it, including Germany, who were struggling to pay their war reparations. The crash of the stock market put 13 million Americans out of work. It also led to a 10-year depression during which millions of Americans starved. It also created an overseas economic climate that contributed to World War II. More astute and modest production and lending would have avoided this altogether. Inflation considered, around $319 billion was lost in the States alone during the crash of 29. Coming into number 7, we have vanity aboard the Titanic. There are a number of reasons the Titanic sank, and a number of reasons why so many people lost their lives. Now, most of these reasons do stem back to poor decision making influenced by vanity. Firstly, there were not enough lifeboats aboard to save everyone, because those in charge thought that the deck looked too cluttered. This was a gross failure of health and safety. While there were reports of iceberg on the Titanic's planned route, these weren't taken seriously. While captains would have been better advised to sail carefully, they didn't. Why? Because White Star Line's chairman Bruce Ismay wanted to make headlines and get to New York early. He demanded that the Titanic sail even quicker. As a result, the Titanic was sailing at 22 knots when she hit the berg. Had her speed been less, she may have been in a better position to maneuver around the iceberg when it came into sight. Design and staff incompetence led to one of the biggest peacetime maritime disasters ever. So, who still uses the imperial system? America. That's who. Anyone else? Okay, so actually it is America, Myanmar, and Liberia. But still. So guys, just bear that in mind as we discuss the Mars Climate Orbiter catastrophe at number 6. So a team of engineers working together to create the Mars Climate Observer mission made an embarrassing gaffe. Some of them used the metric system for their calculations, and others used the imperial system. Now unfortunately, they both weren't working on the same system, which led to some serious failings. Ultimately, the orbiter was not made well, and the mission was a failure. A failure to the tune of $125 million. Sure, the mission did fail and cost a lot of money, but we also missed out on valuable Mars research that could have helped us learn even more about our red neighbour. Coming into number 5, we have the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Okay, so this is the biggest oil spill of all time. BP were found responsible for gross negligence and reckless misconduct and were ordered to pay $18.7 billion in fines. This is the largest amount in corporate American history. Because of BP's negligence, the well plan at the huge offshore oil rig was insufficient, as was the blowout preventer. In April 2010, a methane explosion caused an oil spill that ultimately dumped around 5 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. 11 oil workers were lost in the spill and were never found, and 17 more were injured. Hundreds of thousands of wildlife species suffered as a result of the oil slick too. By the way, this oil slick could be seen from space, that's how big it was. Dolphins, for example, died at 6 times faster than their normal rate. It took in total 5 months to even stop the rig from leaking. Coming into number 4, we have the Chernobyl disaster. The Chernobyl power plant disaster was caused by a badly designed reactor as well as human error. On that fateful day in 1986, power plant workers decided to run reactors at very low power, which they were not actually designed to do. As a result, part of the plant blew and there was not very good containment system in place. A nuclear fire burned for 7 days, poisoning the surrounding area. 28 staff members were killed in the explosion, and thousands of people in the surrounding area were exposed to harmful radiation. It is actually estimated that Chernobyl has led to 7,000 causes of thyroid cancer amongst people who were under 18 years of age at the time of the accident. This is absolutely insane. Slightly controversial, coming into number 3, we have the Iraq War. President George W. Bush went to war with Iraq on the basis that the country had a supply of weapons of mass destruction. It was also partly in retaliation to the 9/11 attacks, which he pinned partially on Saddam Hussein without any evidence. The problem was that these weapons were never found. The war on terror only created more terror cells, and the toppling of Saddam's regime actually created more problems than it solved. Between 150 to 600,000 Iraqis lost their lives as a result of the conflict, as did 4,400 American soldiers. It is thought that the war in Iraq cost the American economy between $2 to $6 trillion. Oh my god. So as with everything on this list, a lot of mistakes are extremely complicated, so of course a paragraph in a top 10 list isn't going to be able to fully cover the issue. When it comes to things like the Iraq War, something really important that's happened in most of our lifetimes, it's definitely worth doing your own independent research to back it up to. Coming into number 2, we have declining Hitler a place at art school. Before Hitler became a dictator, he wanted to become an artist. He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, but was declined a place on 2 occasions. Perhaps if he had been able to focus his energy in art and had a creative outlet for his suffering, he may never have become radicalized and risen to be the all-powerful instigator of World War II. We may never know. What we do know is that World War II saw the loss of 75 or more million lives, so maybe it would have been better off if Hitler was an artist. Of course, without the First World War, there would never have been a Second World War, so that in mind, coming in at number 1, we have one of the biggest mistakes in history that sparked the First World War, and it's totally mundane. That's right, we have Franz Ferdinand's driver simply taking a wrong turn. Many agree that the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria was the spark that ignited World War I. Sure, it was the spark, but it very nearly didn't happen. Franz Ferdinand was in Sarajevo when the Black Hand gang attempted to kill him by throwing a grenade at his car. Ferdinand and his wife were unharmed, but they were later killed when their driver did a U-turn near a cafe in which one of the defeated gang members was having a coffee. What are the odds? Like literally. Seizing his second chance, he then shot Ferdinand and his wife, which later resulted in Austria declaring war on Serbia, which then led to other nations declaring war, and the whole big mess that was World War I. And why did it happen? Because of a U-turn. Wow. Kinda makes you think what other things have been saved from happening in history. Butterfly effect. So guys, that was the top 10 worst mistakes in history, which as I said at the beginning of this list is easy to spot with the power of hindsight. As they say, those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Can you guys spot any mistakes in the making now? The history of medicine is peppered with excellent decisions and discoveries, but right now a first world country is on the brink of making a huge medical mistake that could ruin the lives of millions of people. So guys, what mistakes can you see happening now and why, and what do you think was the biggest mistake on this list? Let me know in the comments section down below. For now, I'm Rebecca Felgate. If you liked this video, if you found it interesting, make sure you give it a good thumbs up, share it with a friend, and stay subscribed to Most Amazing Top 10. I'll see you next time.